This is DPHI Alpha. I am co-lead at Umami Finance, and we have the very cool Merkle Crab from BANXA joining us. This is AMA we've been really excited for. BANXA is an um, awesome group, awesome company doing really exciting things, across the sort of the blockchain ecosystem, but certainly on Arbitrum, very exciting plans. And with that, Merkle Crab, do you want to introduce yourself, and then we can start talking a little bit about BANXA.
Yes, thank you very much, DPHI Alpha. So Merkle Crab here from BANXA. Very excited to be joining the team today to talk all things Umami, Arbitrum, and especially fiat and how we get the next billion people into our awesome ecosystem. So thanks for having me on the line today.
Yeah, and thank you for joining. And really, let's talk about fiat. We're certainly keen to help onboard those next billion people. And maybe just to help familiarize people, we can talk a little bit about both of our projects. So I'll give a very quick overview of Umami and then hand it over to you. We focus. We see ourselves as playing a role in onboarding new users, particularly to the Arbitrum network. So we're trying to build a really user friendly and low risk but high return product that gives people, including sort of non-crypto native folks, exposure to upside from the Arbitrum ecosystem, and really sort of more broadly this big macro trend of TVL migration from mainnet to the L2 scaling chains, which Arbitrum is one of. So we've been working with BANXA for quite some time. We've had an open dialogue, and really excited to be integrating some of their very cool, very user friendly technologies for fiat crypto on ramping into our own product. And I know that they're working with a number of other projects throughout the Arbitrum ecosystem. So I think with that, Merkle Crab, do you want to kind of give people an overview of what Banks is all about, and also then we can talk a bit about what you're doing specifically on Arbitrum?
Absolutely, happy to. So Banks is best described as a plug-and-play fiat on-off ramp. So we're really designed for, I don't know what everyone thinks about this term, but we like it. We're designed for the Web3 world. And that's a world where we've got a long tail of builders and projects emerging out and growing over time, who primarily are building something that's protocol centric, that's really adding value at that layer. In order to really get access to that same kind of audience by size and really be competitive with these centralized projects, at the end of the day, these projects are going to need access to a mainstream audience at some point, and access to that mainstream audience comes through access to the fiat payment rails. So we're really excited by the model we've got. We've got some great partners, obviously, inside centralized exchanges, and then across Web3. Particularly excited by the work we're doing with decentralized exchanges, and particularly excited, even more niche, with the work we're doing with decentralized exchanges inside of L2 ecosystems. But essentially, if you're a project and you sort of said, I want to get access to a mainstream audience, you would sign up for BANXA. Very, very simple, can be done in about an hour or 2 hours, and plug us into your application the same way you'd imagine plugging in PayPal or Stripe. So we've got a really nice model, and I think DPHI Alpha, you'll be talking a little bit more today about what we've done with Umami Finance to really push this a lot further.
Yeah, absolutely, and I'm excited to get into that for sure. And maybe before we do, though, one of the reasons that we exist is because we're very bullish on Arbitrum and on L2s broadly. And I think one thing that really impressed us about BANXA and that kind of kicked off our relationship was that you guys were really out there sort of proactively reaching out to projects on Arbitrum. That's how we got in touch originally, and I got this strong sense that you guys had made a committed and focused play on the on the Arbitrum network and on L2s in general, and we're really sort of leading the establishment of sort of direct to L2 fiat crypto on ramps. And I'd love just to hear your thoughts on sort of what led to that internal strategic decision on your guys' part, and what do you see being kind of the potential upside of having that sort of very user friendly direct route right onto these L2s. That's very exciting to me, so I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Absolutely. Yeah. So just to give you a little bit of history, BANXA was born out of a play we had at doing B2C directly. So this is going way back to 2012. We actually had the domain names at the time: bitcoin.com.au, .co.uk, .co.ca. So we obviously built the payment rails so people could come to those websites, and that was a mainstream audience and buy Bitcoin. And what we found over time was that it was getting increasingly difficult to compete with these massive, really, really well-capitalized, well-funded projects like your Binances and your Coinbases. So we had a big think about it, and we said, look, we've done a lot of work to build up local payment rails because we've got the domains across a wide range of geographies, and that's really not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of sticky and tricky work to really be able to accept payments across the world. But there's a million projects popping up all over the place. Particularly, this was around 2017, 18 in the centralized exchange space, and we thought, not all of them are going to be able to get up and going quickly with the payment rails. They might be making a fantastic exchange, but you can't do these payment rails overnight. So we packaged what we had up into an API, took it to market, and it was one of those sort of divine product market fit moments where we sort of signed up 50 great exchanges in no short order. And we sort of just kept doing what we were doing. A core tenet of what we really believe in is that crypto is for everyone. In its first, say, 5 to 10 years, in some ways, it's been quite a Western-dominated field in some regards, and so we're really passionate about bringing crypto truly worldwide and into pockets and places and communities that can really get great benefits out of it that sometimes we don't realize are benefits living in the West. And then it was really the DeFi summer and going into 2021 where we really watching very closely what was happening as the some might call it the Web3 space emerged, and we realized we've got an even better product market fit here. Because these projects, it's an emergent space. There's a very, very long tail of projects. It's growing off in all different directions. But by nature, a lot of these projects are going to be community driven. They're going to be DAOs, and by nature, not being incorporated entities won't have access to these payment systems. But we were definitely sure that what would happen with these projects is that people would build stuff that's just breathtaking. That's much better than what any sort of centralized company could build. So we saw a great fit in saying, look, we can bring payment rails to you. We can plug it in. It's your application, and now you really are competitive with any business out there trying to offer crypto in a centralized way. And to us, coming into say mid to late 2021, the layer 2 movement was just such an obvious thing. When you talk about a mainstream audience and growing your business through payment rails, you can't get around the fact that $50 gas fees are absolute deal breakers for a huge majority of the market. And so we were watching for a long time very excitedly what was happening with the layer 2 protocols and the work the teams are doing there, and particularly sort of taken away by the Arbitrum team. Through working with them, we spent a long time talking to them and understanding their design choices and how they built what they built. It was clear they were approaching it in a very professional manner. They were very, very strong technically, strong strategically, and we sort of took a bet on them and said, look, it's what they're offering is so obvious. We think it's going to be a bit of a case of the product will hit market, and it will work, and it may just take people realizing that there's a whole new world now where you don't have to do $50 transactions to get all the good stuff out of DeFi. And then we've seen the Arbitrum team really stick to their guns and continue to build and improve the protocol. And of all the layer 2 protocols, it's been a very, very robust one. So we're really happy with that, and happy to work with teams inside the network that are looking to obviously make use of what's on offer now.
Great. No, that's a great overview, and I think you hit on a lot of really exciting points. I mean, one of the things that we really love about being on Arbitrum and that makes us so bullish, and you sort of alluded to this, is that there is this virtuous cycle dynamic where you mentioned that you were attracted to some of the very robust activity going on the Arbitrum ecosystem, and then of course as you provide this fiat crypto on ramp functionality, I think it certainly validates our thesis that TVL on L2 chains like Arbitrum should continue to expand pretty pretty dramatically. Arbitrum's, I think, still when I last checked, around 3 billion in TVL, and mainnet is hundreds of billions, and there's no reason to think that we can't see multiples of expansion of TVL on Arbitrum. And again, it's as projects and companies like yourself sort of set up these new functionalities that make it so much easier to take advantage of the networks. It really does support just kind of continued more activity on the network, and then more reasons for people to onboard, and then of course with your infrastructure, much more seamless on ramping. So we're definitely very, very excited for that. So I guess one thing that I'd be curious just to have you sort of elaborate on a little bit more is the regulatory aspect. I think that one of the things that differentiates you is that you've really made it such a seamless process for projects like us to set up these APIs that you've developed, and just start immediately on ramping fiat into our own project tokens, or if you're DEX, sort of into various tokens on the DEX. And you guys are clearly abstracting away a lot of layers of complexity involved in kind of linking the TradFi world, which is so heavily regulated, very complex to break into, with DeFi in a way that makes it very easy for DeFi projects to sort of remain decentralized. I'd love to just hear a little bit more about how you do that and sort of what the core pillars of your strategy in that area are.
Absolutely, yeah. So our view is that we needed a model that really allowed projects to be themselves and to continue doing what they were doing, and that worked essentially with the environment that existed and didn't seek to change it. And so what we realized was necessary was we needed to take a model to market and continue to do so, where essentially we take on all of the regulatory risk when we work with decentralized entities. And so it's very much that PayPal meets Stripe model, where just temporarily when users on an application want to pay with fiat and access the application with fiat, they'll temporarily hop over, and in that moment we obviously do everything we need to do to be compliant, and there's a lot involved with that, but we do it in a way where it doesn't add any risk whatsoever to the entity itself, and essentially from a regulatory perspective, the user is our customer in that moment when they're doing the crypto transaction. And so we're quite happy with that model, because it sort of allows us to continue in our direction, which is providing that service to decentralized entities, but not really bring any risk to them, and have them able to really seamlessly sort of plug in and sort of get access to that audience without having to worry about anything else that comes with that. It is, it's work, and I think that we're quite happy and passionate by the idea that we do our work, which sits very much on that fiat, real world regulatory side, and we do that and package it up so that companies like Umami and others are able to continue doing what they're doing, which is very much on-chain protocol centric work, and then we can really meet there in the middle and get the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'd like just to quickly introduce, we have Carnation here, who is our treasury manager, and helps innovate a lot of our DeFi products. So he's been very excited about the our BANXA API integrations. So he'll be chiming in, I think, with a few questions as well. But just want to give him a proper intro first.
Oh, thank you. So one of the things that I've been really happy to see is while moving funds from centralized exchanges, sometimes I really notice that the downtimes for some of their withdrawal to L2 is quite long and painful. And I haven't really seen that with BANXA, which is really cool. I was wondering if you can tell me, a little bit about how you are able to maintain such good uptime and liquidity on all these different networks.
Absolutely, happy to do that. And I'll talk, I guess, with as much depth as I can. With obviously we have some processes in place. We've actually gone ahead and built our own capabilities internally to really manage this whole process end to end, and we really saw that as necessary because we didn't think that the centralized exchanges were necessarily at the right place at the right time with what was happening with some of these L2 protocols. And so we were passionate enough, particularly with Arbitrum and some of the others, that we would say, let's get there first. Let's obviously use the existing infrastructure that's out there and the bridges that have been built, and really create a market in that and create liquidity there. And so our core system is it's well over 8-9 years old at this point. It's very, very robust. And so we were able to obviously build on top of that and build it in a way where we were able to essentially handle everything end to end ourselves. So I'm happy to hear that you've not had any issues with BANXA and being able to get onto Arbitrum, and we're really proud of that, and it's something we work quite hard for.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. And speaking of bridges, I'm a heavy user of DeFi bridges, but BANXA connects to so much more. So I was wondering, what type of payment systems from the fiat world you typically take? And for example, if a user is trying to move funds from one of these fiat payment system rails onto Arbitrum, what types of tokens do they have access to immediately?
Yeah, great question. So on the fiat side, we obviously accept credit card globally. I say globally, obviously there's a few exceptions in countries we can't accept, but all the major countries we accept credit card. But where we really pride ourselves on is our ability to provide access to these local payment methods, and we're particularly strong in the Asia Pacific region, particularly Australia with a lot of the local payment methods here, and in Europe with SEPA and other payment methods, and we've got some in the US as well. So it's an area we can continue to build towards and provide access to. But we really see local payments as really meeting L2 in this nice, beautiful way. And we see them as a really good match for each other.
All right. My second part of the question is, for example, to onboard to Arbitrum, what are the token selections that the users can load up their wallets with? I know ETH is probably one of the main ones.
Yes. So this time we're supporting ETH and USDC, and our view there is that we want to do a really, really good job of supporting these base tokens, because we didn't see as much friction in the journey for a user once they're inside the network to get across to another one. I think there's a really good set of infrastructure out there on Arbitrum to get through onto other tokens once you're there with either ETH or USDC. So we've gone with that for now, and we're quite happy with that.
Oh, gotcha. So one of the little curiosities, I guess, is if I'm trying to load up a new wallet with mostly USDC, does BANXA give me a little bit of ETH gas to start with?
That's a great question. We don't subsidize the gas at the moment. We compute it, and so we give a very fair pricing and very open pricing about what we're doing. But we essentially we compute it and take the gas out of the fee.
Gotcha. Yeah. And another fun question. So BANXA maintains, a pretty wide range of liquidity networks, I guess, across all these different chains. So would a possible future direction to be sort of doing cross-chain moving just purely in the DeFi space of various tokens?
That is a great question. We're very, very interested in the world of bridging, particularly cross-chain. I think some of the stuff that's happening there is probably the most innovative thing happening in crypto right now. So we are actually actively in pretty good talks with a lot of the major teams doing bridging, doing cross-chain work. What role we take there, we're thinking through, and we're going to take our time on it. I think if you play it out long enough, we are going to enter a world where a lot of the movement between different networks with different tokens is somewhat abstracted for the user, which means we're going to need a really strong set of players and infrastructure in that space. The space does bring risk, though, and as we've seen recently with the Ronin incident, it needs to be approached quite carefully. So we're obviously, first and foremost concerned with security and holding up our end of the bargain with our users. So we are approaching the space somewhat carefully, but very interested in it.
Perfect.
Great. And one other thing that I would just love to hear your thoughts on, Merkle Crab, DeFi Alpha speaking now, but you mentioned earlier sort of your vision of onboarding 1 billion people and reaching a population that goes beyond sort of the Western world, and is inclusive of pretty much pretty much everyone, given the potential the potential scale of benefits available to all kinds of people from crypto. I'm curious, sort of, as you build out this infrastructure and you sort of observe usage patterns for your fiat crypto on ramps. Do you guys have a view of sort of who you see as being kind of the next group of adopters of crypto, how they differ from sort of the people who are already kind of quite blockchain savvy and have MetaMask wallets set up and know how to take advantage of different opportunities on different chains. It feels like we still have not hit that mass adoption inflection point, and I'm very curious what you see as the characteristics of maybe not even the next billion, but the next 100 million, the people who are on the cusp, and might be taking advantage, of these on ramps, as projects are adding your API to their interface.
Another great question. I think there's probably three groups that are particularly interesting. The first one, which I think is largely happening now, but it's the group of people that are called financial self-determinists. And that's I know people talk a lot about your finance bros coming into crypto, which has certainly happened already and is continuing to happen. But I think that group extends well beyond a certain sort of stereotype of people. And I think particularly in millennials and Generation Z, we're seeing the rise of a lot more financial self-determinism. So I think broadly, the DeFi story is just getting started, and I think we're going to see a new cohort coming in. This year in particular, that's obviously part of that retail trading phenomenon, and are now saying, look, there's much more interesting things going on in DeFi, and I think it's a case of the penny dropping for a few of them when they realize, what this world is compared to what the world outside of it is. The second one, which again is already a major narrative, but I don't think has happened yet, is gaming. There is such an obvious connection point between particularly what's happening in the NFT space with gaming. I just don't think the model has arrived yet, and no one's nailed it in a way that really connects those two cultures. We've obviously seen a range of backlashes against major publishers trying to build in NFTs for their users, and I think that's more than anything a kind of a misfiring on many of their parts culturally, and creating something that really hits home with their users in a way that makes them want to go ahead and use crypto. It's inevitable and it's going to come because it's a played out story. But any game sort of nowadays, its success really lies in that network effect. And that network effect, the value there is generated by the gamers themselves. There's immense IP that gets generated in the form of obviously interactions, but even memes and cultural phenomena that comes out of games. And so the idea that the gamers can now, if the model comes right, that gamers can actually earn through this and benefit from the value they're creating is such an obvious one. I think we're just waiting on the model. My view is that it will happen this year, and we'll be off to the races. But I think that's another really obvious one because there is such an obvious overlap of cultures. And then the final one, which we're sure is going to happen, but it's hard to tell when, is social. And I think that's in a way potentially the biggest kind of mass adoption on ramp that could come. And I think we're definitely at a point in society where people are sort of yearning out for a new social network, or a new set of options for social. And I think the POAPs team in particular and Aave with their Lens protocol are doing some very, very interesting work. But we're sort of right at the bottom layer at this time with all of that. We probably need a bit of UX innovation and a few projects to spin up to really see the use case there. But I think we're probably a lot closer to that one than we realize we are.
That's a great way to break it down, and at least from our vantage point, it feels like that first group, right? That sort of financial self-determination group, sort of millennials and just sort of a younger demographic, but a pretty broad group of people. Feels to me like that that onboarding process is already taking place. That's sort of what it looks like from our vantage point. And as you said, it feels like the infrastructure, and the potential with GameFi, is there. And to your point, it might just be a matter of the right use case and model to cause that to really kick off. And then I agree that social it's clear that that infrastructure is being built now, and it's just a matter of time before we start to see adoption. So that makes a lot of sense to me in terms of sort of a timeline for kind of immediate on ramping. I would be very curious, just from your work, here on Arbitrum, as well as other L2s. But maybe we'll focus on Arbitrum because I think a lot of people listening, are on that network. Can you kind of give a sense of sort of what uptake of your APIs looks like on this network? What sorts of projects are integrating your fiat crypto on ramps, and kind of the pace of adoption? Because I know that you guys have been really doing a lot of great outreach and being very accessible and supportive, and kind of curious to see the pace at which L2s are kind of embracing this new capability that you're bringing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll start probably at the widest spectrum, which is I guess the adoption by Web3 applications and projects, which has been tremendous and fast. So that's quite exciting. We have ongoing discussions with more people than you can imagine, more projects that you can imagine. It's I think we're sort of we're at that point where there's particularly the projects that have been around for some time and really built a community up. It's a logical next step to add those fiat payment rails to tap into a larger audience. Coming into the L2 space, it's a mix at the moment between projects that existed prior to the rise of L2 and are now looking to move over and to add capability there. So we've got a lot of interest from some really great blue chips looking to do that, and I think that sort of validates to us how exciting this space is. But then I guess within I guess the new project category, it definitely is DeFi and particularly decentralized exchanges leading the charge in the space right now. I think there's such an obvious and natural fit between the model that's proved to work really well for DEXs, much lower gas fees, and then tapping into those fiat rails to really go mainstream. I think what we're seeing as well is, particularly in the L2 space, is a range of projects that are sort of stepping up that aggregation layer of DeFi, like Umami does, and really saying, cool, there's a triad of things at play here. We have a lot of the community buy-in and infrastructure for DeFi that's proven itself over the last few years. We're now going to build something that's more aggregated on the top and provides a better user experience than what we're used to. We're doing that on layer 2, where the gas fees are obviously much lower, and coupled with that, we're tapping into that fiat payment networks. So I think it's those three things coming together, which we're seeing a lot of. More recently, what we're seeing a lot of too is a huge amount of interest from NFT platforms. I think that's been another really exciting story over the last 2 years, the rise of NFTs. And I think we are just getting started with that one. We're sort of seeing the NFTs first use case, which is the digital art market. But there's an amazing amount of projects out there building things well beyond that. And that's a really obvious one that sort of taps into that mainstream psyche and is quite easy to understand from a consumer's point of view, that I'm spending money on something and at least this is what I'm getting. I can usually see it. So we're getting a huge amount of interest from NFT platforms at the moment, particularly ones that are really pioneering now and starting on these layer 2 networks.
Perfect. That is so awesome. There's one point I want to circle back to, like about the future of how to onboard most of the world and have them benefit from, the innovations of DeFi. And one of the things that I really love about DeFi is the wide range of yield opportunities. And so I was wondering, like we can speculate a little bit about, what the future middle meeting ground between, for example, bankside and Umami might look like. How do we deliver the best-in-class yield to the masses?
That's a great question. Who's best to answer that? Is that yourself, DPHI Alpha, or myself first?
I'd love to hear your perspective, and then we can chime in a little bit with our perspective too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I keep using this phrase, but I just think it is a perfect match. I think between there's a third party in there also, which you've talked about before. There's ourselves, which is really opening the gateway to that mainstream audience. Projects like Umami have obviously a fantastic financial product and product at large around the financial product. And then there is this emergent space of bridging and inter-network connecting and sort of swapping, which is really playing out very interestingly. And we're really happy to see and really passionate about the rise of this layer of bridging as an infrastructure layer. And for projects like Umami and BANXA to meet somewhere on top of or around or between that space, to really abstract away those clicks and that confusion between getting from one place to another. Ultimately, when a user comes to Umami, what they want is the financial product. At this time, obviously, there's steps to get there, and between ourselves, opening the doors, Umami's great UX and application layer, and then this bridging layer, which we're very interested in. We think the model's very short to arrive. Of something that essentially all of our parents can quite easily get in and do in a way that they understand.
Yeah, I think that's very well put, and I think we're thinking about a lot of the same things, on our end, just kind of at a different point in that chain. I mean, I think that what made us so excited about BANXA is, I think that we share this thesis that that we really have not hit mass adoption yet, and that sort of to your earlier point, the I wouldn't say early adopters are already here, but the first group of people who come in from that, next billion, the early mass adopters, I think are going to largely be, initially these people who are looking to participate in DeFi, and there are some other areas as well, as you said, but I think DeFi is going to be a major draw. And we're looking at probably overall sort of younger people, fairly financially savvy and web savvy, but maybe not at all familiar with operating on blockchain. And I think that there's an enormous opportunity to really take a lot of the core innovations that DeFi has already realized, in terms of getting rid of centralized financial intermediaries, and thereby providing much higher returns on assets, as well as just a lot more flexibility and agency over how people go about generating wealth for themselves and generating yield, and packaging it in a way that is a little bit more user friendly. You talked about sort of abstracting away a lot of complexities, and I think BANXA does an excellent job of that from the on ramping perspective, and I think that there's still work to be done, just in terms of the actual user experience of being, on a DeFi app and, figuring out, okay, so what are these tokens? What's the value proposition here? Is this safe? What's the risk reward profile? And, how do I get exposure to this thing called crypto, or, a subset within crypto, that I know is going to take off, but is very complex. And I think very much Umami's thesis is that we can play a role in abstracting away just a lot of those complexities, and then when you merge that with, as you said, increasingly seamless bridging capabilities, and we actually also have a partnership with Socket, and I think you guys work closely with them as well, but they're really handling abstracting away those complexities of bridging from one chain to another, and then you add to that BANXA and its fiat crypto on-ramping capabilities. You're moving in the direction of a fundamentally simpler and much more user-friendly experience in terms of being able to enter the DeFi ecosystem than what's been available so far. And again, I think what's so at times frustrating but also exciting is that these core functionalities now, whether we're talking about the fiat crypto on ramping, whether we're talking about bridging, or just various ways to get exposure to yield on DeFi, they all exist, right? But it is just about kind of bringing everything together in this more seamless way, that can kind of allow us to hit that inflection point where mass adoption really starts taking off and gains its own momentum. So, yeah, I mean, I think from Umami's perspective, working with banks, it was a need that we had, that had been top of mind, and you guys obviously have been very active and reached out to us, and it was very aligned with our strategy. And so I think that really speaks to sort of what you guys have built, and the fact that it was so plug and play, that the regulatory compliance element was built in, and not something that we had to worry about at all. We really just focused on the API integration itself into our front end was fantastic. And again, it was a plug and play into our existing strategy of onboarding that next group of users, from potential mass adopters into DeFi. So yeah, that's sort of that was our experience. And I don't know if you have any other sort of comments you want to share, Merkle Crab, but if not, I'd love to just sort of open it up to questions from the audience.
Yeah, happy to hear from the audience.
All right, let's do it. Does anyone have questions that they want to share? I should flag that for those of you who are in the Umami community, we have a tab called AMA Questions and Chat that anyone is able to hop into. It's in our general category on our Discord, so that's a place where people can drop questions by text, or just feel free to ask something right here on the Spaces. So I'll open it up now and really look forward to it. Looks like JD Tiger will be hopping on. How are you doing?
Doing good, guys. How you guys doing?
Really good. Yeah. Can't. What's on your mind?
So, I obviously have my opinions on this type of news, on how I believe that this will add a lot of value to not only Arbitrum but Umami. But I'd love to just, in a very simplistic way, either from the BANXA team or the Umami team, just to talk about what you think the biggest value add that BANXA provides, just in terms of long-term value that it'll provide to the Umami DeFi process as well as Arbitrum. And I'll leave it there, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's a great question. Maybe I'll shoot first, and then I'd love to hear Merkle Crab's comments as well. Sort of two separate questions. So the first is Umami, and I can say that because of our position within the Arbitrum ecosystem, I think that there's an especially significant value add for us from BANXA, which is that we see ourselves as playing this role in onboarding new users to Arbitrum. We think there's going to be a wave of TVL coming onto the network, and we want to position Umami to sort of both benefit from that, but also catalyze it, right? We want to do that by being user-friendly in every way. One of those ways is making the process of on-ramping to Arbitrum very easy. And, that's where the socket APIs come in, so that people from other chains can just instantly bridge over to Arbitrum in a completely, in a single transaction. And that's also where BANXA fits in. And, I think, to just add to that slightly, we think that sort of the right type of DeFi product, and that's what we hope we're building here at Arbitrum, or here at Umami on Arbitrum. The right type of DeFi product really should have the capacity to draw someone who is maybe on the edge of getting into crypto, over the edge, so that they say, you know what, I'm gonna take some assets from my fiat account, or my Robinhood, or what have you, and ape into this project on the Arbitrum network, and that'll be my first play in crypto, because I can understand it, and it's user friendly, and I feel safe and comfortable with it. And so for a project such as ours that really wants to capture that kind of marginal user, someone who is not on chain yet but very easily could be, it's really hard to understate the value of BANXA. I'm not sure that we even could fully realize our strategy without that capability. And again, the fact that we have this goal of being a wholly decentralized on-chain project, as we are, but having some of that user friendliness that you might associate with a more centralized project, like a centralized exchange. We really needed that, a special type of solution that would abstract away the difficulty of regulatory compliance, because we still are this small, nimble, decentralized project. We don't have a legal team. That's not that's not our area of specialization. So the fact that BANXA had solved that for us and had a plug and play just made it all the more appealing. So that's my view, and I think I'll let Merkel Krebs speak to sort of the broader impact on Arbitrum. But yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts on JD Tiger's questions, Merkel Krebs.
Yeah, great question, JD Tiger. I think to distill it down to one word, it is accessibility. Because there's always this question of when will crypto go mainstream, or when will DeFi go mainstream, and in many ways, one could argue it already is. You can't walk around LA at this time without seeing a crypto ad or seeing something on TV about it every 15 minutes and seeing the crypto.com stadium. We're really of the view that we're sort of in the era of about where the internet was in, say, 1996, 7 or 8, and that really it is mainstream, and it's a very active point of discussion around the world. It's just not fully diffused yet, and that will come, and depending on what sort of your thesis is, it might be a short time horizon or a long one. But at this point, there's a whole lot of people, and probably more people than a lot of us realize that have heard about DeFi, and it's an exciting concept, decentralized finance. It's if you think about it and take a step back, it's a very cool sounding phrase. So certainly in my network outside of crypto, most people have heard about DeFi and are asking me questions about DeFi. But there's still a huge amount of friction in getting there. If you imagine all our own journeys into DeFi for the first time, we probably forget how much of a fiddle it actually was, and how much accumulated knowledge we had about interacting with a set of different apps online to really get there. And so, if you imagine this marginal audience sort of saying, okay, now's the time, tonight's the night, I'm finally going to do it. I've heard enough about it. I'm going to do something in DeFi. I'm going to put some money in it. What a lot of this audience will do is they'll look for a way in, and they might find themselves on a 10-step list and say, oh, it's a bit much. They'll find their way, we believe, to applications that can readily do it in a way that they already understand. And when it comes to money, there's nothing more understandable than the existing payment rails, and so that the projects and the applications that have access to that, it does a few things. One, it removes that friction, but two, it also brings a lot of trust. Just seeing different projects that actually sort of have that access and have a way to securely pay that's not sort of completely crypto native is a real big trust builder. And so it's that marginal audience that immediately Umami will get access to and out of the projects through Arbitrum. But at the same time, crypto does come in waves, and DeFi does come in waves too. We've already seen arguably two major ones. Our view is we are just getting started in DeFi, and we're going to have many, many more waves ahead. And so when that wave comes, Umami and together with BANXA and then some of our other partners around town in the Arbitrum ecosystem will be there ready, waiting, with a highly accessible route into the market and into the network and into the community, which we're really excited about.
That's great. Thanks, Michael Crab. JD Tiger, did you have any other questions?
I actually do. I've got a follow-up question for Merkel, if he wouldn't mind. And it's okay if you don't want to answer this question, but what does that advertising process or even strategy look like for BANXA that they're taking currently or in the future to try to reach that marginal wannabe DeFi investor that we've definitely talked about? And I'll leave it at that.
That's a great question, JD Tiger, and I'll talk to it where we can. So banks are really, I'll come back to that phrase I use of what we are, which is plug and play. We take the view, and our thesis is, and what we're excited about is the rise of applications on top of applications on top of applications, building away rapidly to create the best financial products in the world and create the best user experiences in the world in crypto. I think a really good framing that the Reddit co-founder used recently was that it's like the return of the open source movement, but this time for real, and really actually working. So if you look at those dynamics over any sort of time horizon, it's what will get built via the open source movement and via, I guess, what they call money Legos, or the interoperability of all things crypto, is they're going to be superior financial products and superior products at large. BANXA's view is that we really want to provide that bridge between the real world and the crypto world, and really nail that underlying service for these projects. And so as far as sort of consumer orientation goes, we really don't want to get in the way of Umami's customers. When someone comes to Umami and they're a mainstream audience member and they want to get into the community and get access to these financial products, from a user journey point of view, our view is that the best thing we can do is actually get out of the way and actually, give those rails and let it happen inside the Umami experience, but get out of the way for the user and let the user be Umami's customer, essentially. And so, our view on that is our route to market is through a wide range of merchants, and every merchant that we add obviously builds trust into the ecosystem, and we really don't play favorites with really any partners out there in the world. We work with a lot of blue chip crypto companies, but also blue chip companies increasingly. And so we believe that every experience a user has where banks is an option, it really builds that trust. And I think you could really imagine the PayPal model as somewhat similar to that. So that's largely our route to market at the moment is through a range of other merchants. So if you imagine a user of Umami for the first time comes on, there's a good chance they would have seen us on Binance, where we already are, or on KuCoin before, and that really brings a level of trust directly to Umami, who also has BANXA as an option now.
Great, that's really helpful, and I think we're getting close to the end of our hour. But does anyone else, JD Tiger or anyone else in the who is listening right now, have any other questions?
Nope, that's it for me. Appreciate it, guys.
Great. Thanks. Really appreciate it. So I'll give a minute here. If anyone else wants to follow up with anything, feel free to fire away. All right. Well, Merkel, anything you want to add on your end? We really appreciate you hopping on. I think it's just been a great conversation. A lot of really interesting insights that you've shared.
Oh, thanks for having us today, DPHI. It's been a great one. I really appreciate it, and we're super excited to see the rise of Umami and what comes next. Got a fantastic product, and we're glad to be a part of it now and to really help out there. As always, like I said earlier, we don't usually pick favorites with projects, and we're just super fascinated by everything happening in the market right now. So please feel free to connect through to the BANXA team. Anyone out there that's building the next great project and really sees fiat ramps as part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way that we look at it is that we would encourage everyone on Arbitrum to adopt BANXA, because I think the more people that you guys help sort of seamlessly on ramp to the network, so the better off the entire ecosystem is. So yeah, it's been great working with you guys, and want to thank everyone here who's been listening. Please stay tuned. We're going to have our BANXA integration up very soon. I think tomorrow morning Eastern Standard Time it'll be live. So stay tuned, and thanks again for joining.
Thanks, everyone.